I'm Craig Klein. I'm the CEO of Sales Nexus, and I'm very proud to introduce you to my good friend Mark McNamara of the Enablement Group. He's going to welcome Mark.
Thanks.
Mark's going to really go deep into what's working these days in enabling revenue based on his years and decades of experience back in the days before technology was part of the equation. And now Mark's on the cutting edge of innovating in the technology space around this too. So he's got a great perspective. So I'm really looking forward to his insights here. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Everybody that joins the meeting, we can't hear you, we can't see you, but we do want to hear from you. So look for the chat. Should be on the right side. Should say chat or comments. And you can type in your questions there. Sabrina Ferguson is also on the call with us. And she'll be helping me keep an eye on your comments and questions so that we can feed them to Mark and he can respond to you. We want to keep it as interactive as possible. So keep those questions coming. Same thing for everybody that's watching on YouTube and LinkedIn and so on like that. We'll be watching those as well. So with that, Mark, welcome and thank you for being here and take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. And thanks everybody for joining today. I'm excited. I always get excited when I can share, some knowledge and help people along in their sales and service practices. And, as Craig said, I've been doing this a long time. I hate to age myself, but it's been about, 38 years, almost 40 years that I've been helping organizations with their sales and sales and service, processes. I think it's important, while I've gone deep in many ways in helping organizations implement technology, enablement technology, and we can even talk about, what is enablement. For a long time, I've heard so much, everybody sort of has a different definition, and it's even moved into this other space. I mean, 15 years ago, I think the term was kind of invented, sales enablement, and we saw, what fills that role of sales enablement, what technologies fill that role. I think the last time I looked, Craig, there were some 2,200 sales enablement technologies on the market. Okay, it's sort of mind-boggling how much is out there. And the question, that I try to bring to the table, and the purpose of this, webinar is, technology is not a panacea. It doesn't necessarily solve the problem. It comes down to fundamentals, and part of what I want to, talk about today is what are the fundamentals to find that hidden revenue. And it's not like there's stuff hanging out. It's more about our organizations, and I'm sure some of you are doing many of the things I probably will talk about, but a lot of organizations I talk to just aren't in tune with what it takes to really enable or get their sales and service, and that includes pre-sales. The whole pipeline, depending on the size of the organization, really moves from, business or sales development to account executives. And the sale isn't completed even from that standpoint until you get to services, right? And revenue enablement even goes upstream from there, that there's a lot of money that I'm sure you as an organization spend on even supporting your brand and creating qualified or leads or suspects that go into a sales development rep or even straight to account representation. And the problem that has become is the revenue enablement focus is about how to optimize that cross-functional, even if it's, one or two people in the organization, to make sure that things move along appropriately, right? And what technology has done is put us at the point of, moving at the speed of light, or even faster than light if something goes faster than that, in order to make a sale. So the opportunity to misstep, not respond quick enough, right, or have the right approach or understanding can really put you at a disadvantage, because even now customers or prospects, they're not always very patient, depending on what you're bringing to the table, and they expect that the process they go through is part of your value, because so much of what we do is getting commoditized on a rapid basis, including technology. I mean, Craig and I were talking about this the other day. It's like every unemployed programmer here and across the world suddenly has a piece of technology that they'd be interested in selling you. So I encourage you to make any comments. This is pretty informal, and I'll keep jabbering away and give you my thoughts as we go. So you can see the definition of revenue enablement. And I think for some companies it's bigger than others, but it's really about one of the first things is making a distinction in terms of the customer point of view and the salesperson's point of view. But the stakes are so real. They really hit, and they hit hard. I've got stories and can tell you stories. I mean, the first one I can tell you about is missed forecasts. I was doing some consulting for a medical consulting firm, and they were recruiting people out of the medical industry. These were doctors that they were recruiting to be account executives. And in the first year that I worked with them, they missed their call. By call, I mean their forecast on 3 quarters. And the problem was they were bringing these salespeople in very rapidly, and they didn't consider, even though they were mature and were buyers at some level, that they knew how to develop a forecast and what a forecast meant. Okay, so there was a whole onboarding and training issue there. I won't tell you the name of the company, but the first quarter I was involved with them, they missed their forecast by 80%. And I can tell you that the CFO was not very happy. You don't run a business when you can't hit your call, and heads roll, right? I think the other thing, and many people see this, particularly in smaller companies, is inconsistent execution, right? And we all know, and you've probably heard the dilemma, the larger the sales force that you have, you've got different levels of capability. You have some people who are more mature, so they might be A's and B's, and then you grade them down to C's and D's. And those that are RAs don't necessarily transfer those skills and that knowledge to others. And there's a missed opportunity there to capture that. One quick story I will tell you is that I did a big consulting gig with a very large computer firm of 2 initials. I won't tell you who they are, but they built a repository. They got all their A players to record something we had them call Ring the Bell, right? And Ring the Bell was just a knowledge capture feature. And in those days, we had to use a telephone, and you had to submit some slides and use the telephone and narrate the slides and answer 6 questions. It was the most popular content in their sales repository compared to any other piece of content. And that's just knowledge sharing. And it helped in, shaping the execution. Ramp times, if you're a chief sales officer or head of sales, whatever your title is, you want to get people productive really, really fast. But it's a challenge, particularly in a smaller organization, to make that happen, right? And often, as the quotation is there, the average time when we survey CSOs is 6 to 9 months to see, some base productivity. And we don't have to do that anymore, right? There are ways to make people more productive with what we have in our hands. And it isn't necessarily technology. It's back to that concept of knowledge, right? And how do you foster knowledge and coach? I mean, when I started in the field, I worked with a lot of people who had cut their teeth with Xerox. And the reason I mentioned Xerox is they had one of the best sales training programs in the industry back in the day. Craig's shaking his head, yes, because you couldn't even go out and sell anything on your own until you were mentored by at least one, if not two salespeople, and you ghosted them on every call that they did for up to a year. I'll tell you, it was a great learning experience because it was like infusion, you know. It was amazing, and it was a metamorphosis. The last, and this is very, very common, even though you might know what to do, pressure defaults. It's a great thing to understand is that when people are pressured to meet quota, okay, they feel a lot of pressure. And I've seen a lot of sales managers. They're not necessarily coaches. We used to call them spreadsheet jockeys, because all they cared about and all they did with their teams was to say, what are you closing this month? What's going to close this month? Instead of asking the question, what are the obstacles and how can I help you close business? Those are two different questions to ask, right? And those pressures really can hurt an organization, particularly on younger, less experienced salespeople. And those people are coming up in the world. And in fact, sales, sales isn't always seen as something that, even though it's very lucrative for people, that they want to go into, because they feel that pressure. They absolutely feel that pressure. So the other thing that I see a lot of when I talk to organizations is they think that they've got it all done in terms of enablement, right? Oh, we brought them in, we gave them death by PowerPoint, so they're trained. You understand the basics about the product, you understand, our sales process. Okay. It doesn't matter that once you walk out the door from that 2 days of training or 1 week of training, you've forgotten 80% of it. Right. So training in the world of trainers, real trainers, is you've hit competence. Competence takes a long time to achieve. It doesn't happen in a week. Right. And there's ways to work on that. Right. We've got the content. That's the second box. It exists, right? It's stored somewhere. However, I've been involved in creating big repositories, okay, organized really well, okay, but nobody uses it, right? It's either too hard to find, or it's just not being made a habit. It's not being promoted. It's not being, in a good word, internally marketed. I've done consulting, or I actually worked for one company where everything was the inbox, right? Everything was the inbox. And there wasn't a lot of activity in the case of somebody saying, hey, let me bring you to this. Let me show you it. Do you understand what it means? Do you understand how to use it? Right? It was typically, here it is. It's labeled really well. Go at it. Right? The other one that's really good, and while we have this great tool, no insult to Sales Nexus, it's a great platform and it's getting better every day. It's in the CRM. But again, there are circumstances where the CRM is a great tool for prepare, but it isn't necessarily a great tool in the moment, right? It comes down to competency and pressure. Oh, I can't go into the CRM. It'll take me too long to get that information, right? Or we make assumptions about people. I hired this person because they know it. Well, that's a bad assumption too, right? We all are in a position that we're put into new situations, or we're pivoting on something. It doesn't mean we know the best way to pivot or respond or move forward in a way that's going to make us a trusted advisor to the customer. So it's not that there's a lack of information. Everybody creates volumes of stuff, but the problem is context, clarity, and confidence, right? if you haven't used something or you haven't developed that muscle memory, you may not be apt to want to go forward with that. So I don't think I need to go through this slide too much. We've all seen lost deals, right? And we've all experienced something. I recently had one that, I don't know that if I had the data, I could have pivoted. Well, I probably could have, now that I reflect on it. And I lost a multi-million-dollar deal because I didn't anticipate a market condition that came upon us, right? I probably could have dealt with it sooner. And I'll be frank with you all, it was tariffs. It was tariffs. And the issue was we had bundled this offering in a way that was very expensive for a 5-year engagement. And had I thought about it sooner and communicated to the channel that I was working with, it wasn't my direct deal, I would have counseled them to break it apart into smaller invoices. And instead, the size of the invoice scared the CFO, and he wouldn't sign off on it. Had it been smaller, it would have felt less risky, and I think we would have gotten through that. So it was something that, outside influence, people thinking about things differently, experience, right, takes you to a different place. And those things are critical and are real issues in regards to how do you move through something and anticipate. And I think, what's interesting is that, Nexi and other AI is starting to help with that, but it's only as good as the way you manage it, right? You have to think of those things first, right? You have to categorize that information first and get it on paper, right?
Mark, Darren's asking a good question that I think is relevant to what you're talking about like when you have a buyer in a new industry that maybe it's a new industry that your company hasn't traditionally done business with, or just a new industry to you as the sales rep, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you don't have a lot of familiarity. That's a great example of where your slide kind of touches on the salesperson may just kind of get stuck and not know how to respond to questions, appropriate answers, blah, 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 right?
That's a great point. And it's where we've done a lot of work with companies, and that I think, Darren, what's really important is that particularly the salesperson or the account exec may not have encountered that industry. But there's also an opportunity to go upstream with your product management, right? Those who own the product, to look at, okay, the what ifs, right? And again, prepare for those, because all your value propositions that you bring and start to look at, and I'm sure, Darren, you've thought of, the persona of the industries of your ideal customer profile and where you're most valuable. But those elements can certainly play in other industries. And relative to Nexi, what's interesting, once you have those plays, feeding something like AI, and maybe you haven't thought of an industry or it's a new industry, okay, AI is going to go, oh, you already got this information, right? Just use it differently.
Right.
So then in that case, you can say, oh, we've never encountered, swimming pool manufacturers, right? Boom, what would we say differently? Or what value propositions have we already mapped, or key messages or insights that could be crafted in relation to that? Does that make sense, Craig, from your
It does, yeah. And just to kind of dig a little bit deeper on that, to me, I'm kind of playing catch up here with you. You and I met a few months ago, and I've learned a tremendous amount from you. But when you and I met, like in my mind, sales training, sales enablement, I wasn't really clear what the difference was, right? You've kind of started to shed some light on that just here today. But, again, the slide you have up right here, to me, that's the real practical example of what actually happens in the real world. Doesn't matter if you're talking about a seasoned expert, long-time industry hand, or a brand new guy, straight off the bus, so to speak. Either way, they sometimes just get stuck, right? They don't have the right answer. The standard, what sales trainers will teach you is when you don't have the answer, you say, well, that's a great question. I don't know the answer right now, but I will find out, right? Mm-hmm. And so the salesperson writes that down and they're going to go, that's a follow-up action, right? But that's where things fall apart. It may not be that easy for the salesperson to get the answer, right? So that friction makes it less likely they'll follow through. And in the meantime, as your slide points out, the buyers just kind of, hey, I'm moving on,
Yeah.
I want to deal with somebody who knows how to answer my question now. And in today's world, that bar is only getting higher because people expect you to be relying on AI to answer their questions instantly, right? So you've got to be able to say, hey, new industry, put it all together. Tell me how to respond to this question.
Yeah. And there's a process to that. That's really important. I'll tell you a quick story. I did it was 10 years ago. I launched my company, the company that I founded, the Enablement Group, with Extreme Networks. And networking is a crowded space for sure. But we worked very long and hard with the product managers, because the way we overcame that, there was no AI in those days, but what we did was we used a chat function, which we built for them. But the idea was there was a deal support desk, meaning if I was a rep and I'm on a call, right, I'm talking to a customer or I have to email them back. Boom, I hit a button, it's right there, pops up out of Salesforce, wherever I'm doing my business, and I can add, pardon me? Sales night. Well, I say that because it was Salesforce with Extreme.
Right,
but,
sure.
The thing that happened was that desk was manned, no insult to women, populated by a product expert. Okay. And what would happen is they could have a dialogue back and forth instantly. And that product expert either would go into a library and hand them information, or say, give me 3 minutes, and would type or give them a dialogue to come back with. And it worked. Yeah. That was part of, we did a whole thing of enablement. We had a lot more to it, but, and we did that for their channel, which exploded because the channel was the least informed about their products and services. And that's where they were getting the majority of their business. So Makes sense. Put all these support mechanisms, right? And to your point, Craig, enablement is nothing more than, in my opinion, knowledge management. And it starts with a training function, right? And it looks at what do you have to have as outcomes. And we're going to talk about outcomes here in a minute, and how do you make that all happen, right? So I think there's some mistakes. Some will recognize these, but there's 5 major sort of things to be critical about in your organization to prevent the leaks. Again, I've been at this a long time. And when I started doing sales training, it was all about sales process, right? Everybody's heard about, value selling and Aslan, and you can name them all, right? I mean, there's dozens of them out there, and they were all focused on process. But what's happened is that as technologies come into play and things that occurred, like, when we really got sophisticated with marketing automation and websites, and now with AI to boot, I mean, you have a prospect. Sometimes they know more about the company than the salesperson knows, I mean, when I'm buying now, I just go deep, you know. And one of the ways I associated myself with you when we met, Craig, was I went deep. I tried to gather as much information and about you before I even reached out. So that happens a lot.
So that's kind of the landscape that you're describing now going forward is we should kind of assume that the customer is going to be more informed than the sales rep. And the sales rep is not really, they're not even trying to be a sales engineer. They're more of a facilitator of getting the right information for the right situation.
Correct. And the thing where it says buyer reality, what a buyer wants is a trusted advisor, right? And a quick story, I have turned prospects away who have come back to me later because I said, you don't need me. You don't need me. No hard sell. Understand the customer and their journey, right? Where are they? What are they thinking about? Instead of your sales process. Yes, sales process is important for developing and keeping your forecast, but that's not how buyers or prospects buy. And when you're building plays or you're thinking about what the customer wants, okay, you got to deal with that. I mean, the first thing a prospect wants is to be pitched. Don't pitch me, right? And we often forget that. I mean, I used to counsel sales development reps, and their approach was, "Hi, I got you on the phone. You want a demo?"
Right. Sure.
No, I don't want a demo. I just want, I want to understand whether what you have can help me or whether you understand what my problem is. Do you even understand what I'm trying to solve? Right. So your questioning strategy and when you deliver information is extremely important. And there needs to be some focus on that. Right. I think the second thing, and we all suffer from this, is content without context. Right. I've seen marketing work on so much material, but not create the context on when and why and where to use it, right? So there's a library, but what do I do with this, right? And let's be real, I'm a salesman as much as anybody, but salespeople are so pressed for time. Don't expect them to necessarily read the content you want them to use, particularly if it's new, right? They're under so much pressure, particularly white papers and position papers, right? They're not necessarily going to absorb that. So the more you can do in terms of a synopsis or giving them the contextual approach, and again, this is where used correctly, AI can help, right? It's your knowledge, it's your material, how you create context to the salesperson so that they don't lose opportunity is really, really important, right? You can
I think there's like two elements of that we're working on anyway, and it's a work in progress. It's not perfect yet. But, one is just if things stall in my pipeline, then make sure alerts are happening and new things are happening and just nothing goes cold and just stops. Right.
Yes.
So that's number one. But the number two, that's where the AI comes in, is where, you have a call with a customer, it's transcribed, whether it's a meeting or an actual phone call, whatever, automatically. And now the AI has the context of that conversation and all of those questions that the customer asked, the AI can then recommend, hey, you might want to follow up with this piece or that piece, or clarify your answer to this question or whatever. And even in our initial use here in the last 2 or 3 months, it does pretty well with that. So it's all about, having that library put together and sort of tabulated the way that you've talked about when you and I've spoken about what you guys do. That is really the foundation of all this,
Indeed. And if you look at 1 and 2, okay, and the work that has to do with that. So to your point, Craig, you have to create the context. You have to teach the AI if you're going to use it, right? Why should I understand this? And that's part of your play. If you look at 3, 4, 3 and 4. These are really, in my opinion, huge problems today, given the pressures, right? The days of Xerox and mentorship and all of that are gone, and nobody has that time anymore, right? And most organizations, as I was stating earlier, they look at training as an event. Training is systematic today. It's not an event. People learn with continuous reinforcement and coaching at the time that they need it, right? I have a problem. How do I solve it, right? Oh, I learned that, or it was taught to me in the classroom. God help me, I couldn't remember that if I had to, right? So how do you instill that into their everyday responsibilities, right? How do you instill that into their flow of work? And that goes to number 4, right? And it's the thing that you and I have been talking about, Craig, is that, a lot of organizations look at CRM as a reporting tool only, right? Management wants to know what's coming down the pipe, but it can be so much more when you think about it correctly, right? It's often used for making decisions about how well somebody did rather than necessarily guiding them with an opportunity to do better, right? And that's the promise of what you got going with Nexi. But again, I want to warn people, it's not automatic. It's just not, you don't just let it reach out on the internet and figure it out for you. You got to teach it. You got to counsel it.
Right.
You got to implement it correctly, right?
You're absolutely right. We've seen that. Like now that we have clients really going live and migrating their existing CRM into the system. Just that, even though they were doing it in a different system, and so the data is a little organized differently, they put it into our new system with Nexi, and it sees all of that history of years and years and notes and proposals and sales opportunities and stuff, and just instantly the answers and recommendations it's giving the sales rep are just a million times better.
Yeah, and this stuff is going to mature. It's going to mature pretty rapidly. And my goal in collaborating with you and collaborating with companies is to make sure that they use it well, because there's going to be a lot of pitfalls. People, I don't think necessarily understand all of that. And I don't want to get into a technological discussion, but so it's a facilitator and a reinforcement tool and a guidance tool for the sales reps. And then when I was talking earlier about spreadsheet jockeys, is to get managers out of the role of inspectors or abusers. I've seen that happen. And teach them proactively how to be better coaches, right? And it isn't always natural. I mean, one of the things about sales managers is that they're often promoted into sales management systems roles because they've been good salespeople, but it doesn't necessarily make them good trainers or coaches. So how can the system reinforce that and give them tools and guidance? Because the human factor is still important. AI is not the end of everything, the end job. We still need people, okay, to be leaders and coaches and trainers and mentors. And that's an important distinction. And the AI will help those people as well, where it's just not a natural capability for them. So these are kind of, oops, didn't carry my picture there. These are kind of the things that I just reviewed, okay? And I've probably given you a lot in regards to these, so I won't spend a lot of time on these slides, but would rather, if people have questions or challenges to what I'm saying, I'd really appreciate those comments. Craig or Sabrina, if you have anything you want me to highlight, I'm happy to. So we talked about, when process meets reality. These are kind of the details I've already gone through on that single slide. And this will help you reference back because we're going to distribute the slides, are we not, Craig, at the end of the presentation?
Yes, sir. We'll be sending out the recording and all that good stuff.
Yeah. And I think as you look at this, there's some scorecard issues here, right? which come in these little notations. So the question is, do you believe your reps clearly articulate the buyer decision at each stage? Do they know that, as opposed to their sales process? So what are your stages of the buyer journey? Have they been laid out? And do the reps understand what the buyer's decision or question is? It can be a question when they're in that part of the journey. And journey mapping is important. And, for transactional sales, it's a little easier. For very complex and high value sales, it can be a lot harder,
Well, can you go a little deeper on what you mean by the buyer journey? Because what I see is most people aren't really even thinking about it as a buyer decision. It's more, we did the demo, so that means we're moving to the next step, right? So it's about my behavior, not the buyer's behavior.
Well, here's an example, and I know it's a little small, okay? So you can see it typically, and this is not a perfect map, it's an example map. So in the buyer needs, to know that they have a problem, right? So, in a lot of organizations where the hammer looking for a nail, right? Well, that nail doesn't necessarily know it's a nail, right? So how do you?
Right. Just because I'm a family of 4, and I live in a certain neighborhood and have a certain income, that may make me appear to be a prospect to buy this new condo that I'm building or finishing, right? Doesn't mean I'm looking to buy a condo right now.
Well, and one good example is, in Fiserv and insurance these days, compliance is huge. Compliance. And many organizations, as they get into things, public companies especially, don't realize the compliance issues they have, and the attorneys don't even necessarily keep up. So if you had a product that would help them with compliance because some state regulation has changed, or it's constantly changing, or in healthcare, HIPAA and all the things that go with staying in line with the law, that's one where you can easily call an executive and they don't even realize they have a problem like that. Related back to AI, we were talking about this yesterday, all these AI companies and people buying AI, there's a whole level of legal issues now when you put it to use in terms of liability. So attorneys are going out there and saying, hey, I don't think you realize that instituting AI has some issues with it, depending on what industry you're in and how you're using it. So there's another example, right? And a lot of these before were upstream, meaning marketing was handling this. But in a lot of smaller companies, and even where the way that we're prospecting today, a lot of it's driven down to the salesperson. So you may have to help them rather than, just targeting them in a process, make them aware of the problem, right? That's where SDRs don't necessarily work well, right? When we built playbooks, it's like, hey, show them that they have a problem, right? Talk about it. Don't ask for the demo. Educate them if they don't understand, right? Okay. And then bring them into exploring the solution. With a lot of software, that's a free trial. But free trials are troublesome because people sign up and they don't do much with it. So you gotta have guidance, or what are my outcomes? Why should I look at this? What does it do for me that somebody else doesn't do for me, right? And you would look at that as discovery. Evaluating, right? Multiple vendors. What's the competition, right? Don't diss the competition, right? You know that from a play, but compare and contrast. And what do you have that you feel puts you in a better position to do business with me as opposed to somebody else? Not just because you're cheaper, and discounting is a bad move. We know that, right? So how do you do that? And then how do you facilitate decision-making, right? This often is one where I see people losing deals a lot, in that they don't understand how the company would make a decision. right? Particularly if it's by committee, or you've got 5 executives who have to sign off on this proposal, right? Yeah, we're in this process, we're in the stage of the process, but what does it really mean in terms of their journey? Do they need ratification? Is purchasing involved? Is legal involved? All the things that go there. What's the checklist for them? And how do they facilitate that for you so that you facilitate it well with your company and make it work for them, right? And then they make a purchase. Doesn't mean, in my book, that they're a customer, right? That's when they get handed over to your adoption team or your customer service team, and that you seal the deal, particularly where so much these days is renewals, right? You want to create a raving fan. So yeah, onboarding, but what does that mean to them, right? What's the milestone for them that they realize that value? And in their journey, you can get a testimonial from them that they say, you're the best thing since sliced bread, rather than this is more transactional and it's simplified. This is more value-based and customer-centric, right? So that's just an example, and we can go deeper or have discussions more about that than just this one slide. Was that helpful, Craig, you think?
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm as you're going through all of these, I'm sitting here thinking about my Sandler training days back when I was, had my sales team going through Sandler training, and at every one of these steps, right, there's kind of what those guys used to call the takeaway question, right? Where, if you're at that problem awareness stage, right? Like you can show up and say, hey, we've got a better widget that's less expensive, higher quality, lasts longer, blah, 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 right? All these benefits. But what salespeople struggle to do, we all do. It's kind of just, sometimes it feels awkward, I think. But the thing that's hard to teach salespeople to do is ask the customer, is that a problem that you're trying to solve right now?
Yeah.
Right. Or what the Sandler guys would always say is, have you given up trying to fix that? Yes. Or is it just not a priority right now? Sometimes that's the case, right?
Well, there's even, you can go in front of this to say, how do you even earn the right to ask the question? We see that as I mean, how many phone calls go unanswered? How many emails get thrown in the trash, right? I mean, that's an early problem. Yeah.
But just to kind of bring this back to sort of sale, we're enabling the salesperson, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we want to teach them to be better at qualifying and not kind of pushing their opportunity through a pipeline sort of artificially, right? But what I think what we want the technology to do is to make it easy for the sales rep when they recognize that, right? Like, I just asked that question, and clearly this is just not on this customer's list of things to do this quarter or this year or whatever. Doesn't mean that's not a prospect. Might be a prospect next year, next budget cycle, next season, whatever, right? But the salesperson's attitude is, I have the opportunity right now. I'm going to double down and try to close them no matter what, and hope I get lucky, right? Partially because they know what they invested to get to that point, right? And they feel like that's all going to be wasted. But I think also because they know themselves and their systems are not perfect. We're all human. And even though that customer may be saying, yeah, look, our budget comes up again, in January. So let's talk in late Jan or early Feb, and, things may have changed. The sales guy knows I'm probably not even going to remember your name by then, So So what does he have to lose to just go for the close right there? If the organization is able to establish a process where the sales rep has confidence that even if he as a human just forgets who that prospect was, when February rolls around, the system is going to say, hey, remember this guy? You should probably call him right about now.
Sure.
Then it changes their behavior a lot, I think.
Sure. Yeah. There's a lot buried in there too. I mean, it's the whole concept of sunk cost too. I mean, knowing when no is a no. I mean, too many salespeople just put a long tail on something, which can, you got better things to do, right? So it goes in both directions. But you're right. I mean, coming back to it at the appropriate time. I got great examples where it took 2 years to have somebody buy. You just gotta wait and don't force. People appreciate that.
I mean, it depends on the business, right? If you're selling used cars, I get it, right?
If they walk off the lot, they're not coming back.
Go for the close, right? That makes sense.
Right.
But if you're in your business to business situation where these companies are going to be your clients for a long, long time, the last thing you want is to be encouraging your salespeople to treat them that way. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Moving on. So just to keep going here. Again, the key insights, we've been through all these points, and I know we're coming to 10 up on the hour, and I want to make sure we answer anybody's questions. These are just going through the things we already talked about. Content and training gaps are huge leakage points, right? My theme, and I've said this, and I've done another webinar and presentations on the key is knowledge, right? I mean, systems are great, but without knowledge, without using the knowledge effectively and reaching competency, nothing improves. And there's so many surveys. I don't know if people remember CSO Insights, and we now have the Revenue Enablement Society, and we've got Sales Manager Society. They all point to the process of bringing people to learn and instill the knowledge into people to be able to make things happen. And the machine's not a replacement for that. The machine is a facilitator of that. And if we keep that in mind, you can do great things, right? Systems and leadership, very, very important. I think this is where, our collaboration, Craig, really works well in that, CRM is not just a reporting tool. It's a facilitator of so much more. And I think that's the future. And I think, you've done a great job in bringing that into Sales Nexus. And I think it's only going to get better. And the historical information will help with prediction and, doing the knowledge management and using it appropriately inside of there so that there's knowledge and training at the point of need when you need it and content. And then having managers and facilitating a change in behavior there. And I don't want to say every manager is a bad manager, but we've seen it rampant in the sales industry because they're not trained to be, coaches, right? And they're getting pressure. Vice President, the Chief Revenue Officer saying, "What's closing?" And you're all driven by revenue. It's the lifeblood of the company. So there's a lot of pressure to get it done. But I think if we can help people step back and be facilitators of the entire process, I think you'll see, deals close faster, right? So your velocity increases, your discounting goes down, and you'll see improvement and more productivity from your people. More people will hit quota as a result. And if anybody's interested, I have a position paper with when you do this, how it breaks out in a company. It's about 12 years of data to show that this stuff really works. So anyway.
Well, real quick on that, Mark. I mean, one of the things that I hear about the most is just the deal goes cold, right? The customer ghosts you or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just stall, and that's kind of, you've touched on that in a number of different ways, but I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes it's not that the sales rep didn't have the right content or anything. They're doing a great job in their conversation with the prospect, and they're setting up front contracts at the end of every meeting and all of that stuff, right? And then the guy just disappears, right?
Right.
And I guess my question, you brought up kind of your paper. How big a portion of kind of the revenue leakage or drift that you see is that one specific issue?
You mean the knowledge transfer, basically?
No, just deals that stall and kind of.
Oh, I haven't seen a deal in some way, shape, or form not stall. Let's put it that way. Because at some point, on average, there's something that gets in the way, and I don't mean it's the salesperson's fault, but because they didn't answer immediately when they had a group of people in a call or they had engagement, it moves. We can't meet with you now for another 10 days. That's a stall. That's a stall when you got 1 week left on the month, right?
Or just, my CEO's decided to go on vacation for the next 10 days.
Exactly. So I don't mean to be facetious, but I really, it's just the nature of the thing. And I think you can't prevent all of it, but you can improve on a lot of it, right? If you deal with it correctly. And, the most egregious stalls, as I've pointed out here, is lack of knowledge or content, contextually based content that's going to answer questions, okay? And then prepare you to ask the right questions. We don't always, how many people have seen the suffrage of happy ears, right? I call it happy ears. Oh, I closed the deal. Mm-hmm. Did you? Why do you say that? Well, he said he's going to buy it. Mm-hmm. That's not a closure, right?
Right.
You got a lot of work to do, right? And that was the problem with the first scenario I gave you. All these doctors heard positively that what they had was valuable, and they took that to be a close. But they had, 10 more steps in their selling process and buyer's journey to get to a close. It was, in some cases, 6 months out as opposed to that quarter, Mm-hmm. So, I think that's where, your revenue leaks is in that time frame. And to be more productive just requires having the right things at your disposal and the right knowledge. You can't prevent it all, but I'd say you're going to do a lot better job. We'll skip the tools thing. I've made that point before. And I think I will make one point that one of the things I appreciate, and this is a little log rolling, I guess, but, Sales Nexus in its elegance, particularly what you're doing now in the total package, is really critical. The sales stack, and many salespeople are like, oh, stop. How many things you're going to make me log into, right? Mm-hmm. How many things do you think are going to solve this problem and that problem? And it gets so complicated, right? I mean, there's a great, I don't have it here, but happy to share it with people. There's a great chart that shows that with all the administrative tasks at hand, salespeople only have about 28% of their total time to sell. All the other time is dealing with technology and administrivia, we like to call it, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yep. No, you've mentioned Xerox before, right? what I remember a guy that I met in my early career, which by that time Xerox was already kind of legend and sort of at the end of their great reign of, you know, the elite sales organizations. But this guy had worked at Xerox, and he had this binder that was their kind of sales playbook, right?
Right.
And what was so awesome about it is it was all tabulated, and you could just look at those tabs as a salesperson, and every situation that you were commonly going to run into with your customers, there was a tab for it. You just flip it over, and there was a letter that you could send the prospect that addressed that particular question or issue or objection or whatever. And, you know, some kind of cost analysis and all the resources you needed for that specific issue that the customer was bringing up. And what you brought up just now, what people have replaced that with is, oh, well, yeah, all the marketing content's over here, and you put all your sales customer information over here in the CRM, and then you got the product information over here, and it's the salesperson's job to figure out where to go at what time, and then kind of collate it all together and put it into some kind of communication to the customer. It shouldn't be that way, right? It should just be, here's my customer, here's what their problem is, here you go, send them this, right?
Yeah, and I think the digitization of things made it worse.
Mm-hmm.
The discipline. I mean, I was actually with a company where we were providing sales portals in the early days, starting in like 1998, 99. And it became too easy to create material, and it just became overwhelming. So it's back to, you know, it's knowledge management, it's content management, and it's the discipline here that I'm talking about of how to embed this into a systematic approach that will fix your revenue leaks, you know. I think we're at the top of the hour, and I want to be respectful of people's time. Unless there's any questions or any more closing comments, I'm hoping people enjoyed the discussion, and I'm available if people have follow-on questions. You're welcome to email me, and we'll send out a package of material to everybody, including the slides, and we have a scorecard that'll go along with it, which we'll send to them, and they can follow up from there if they like.
Yeah, there's actually a question, somebody asking about the scorecard here. Tell us more about that. What is that?
It's a very simple checklist, and you give yourself a score from 1 to 10 on each item in there across this board to determine whether you're doing the right things. And it's kind of a self-evaluation. So we'll attach it in the email, and they can have that and use that.
Okay, awesome.
Themselves. Awesome. All right.
Well, Mark, thank you very much. This has been great. Really a lot of insights, and really appreciate you putting this together for us. And you know, for everybody that's joined us, thank you very much for your time. We know you're busy, as we've been talking about here. You got customers to go sell, and it's very valuable when you carve out time to do this kind of thing. So we're going to make sure and try to make the most of it for you. We'll send you a recording and the scorecard and a couple other things that Mark mentioned in the next couple of days. And we'll be doing this again. We have another one scheduled for March 3rd. So you'll be getting some information about how to register for that. And we'll just kind of, the idea is we're going to peel this onion back one more layer and just keep going, so that really over the course of a few weeks here, you guys really get a good comprehensive understanding of what matters and what doesn't matter in sales enablement, and really get to kind of mind meld with Mark here. So yeah, look forward to that. Mark, I look forward to doing it again. Thanks a bunch.
No, it's been great. I appreciate it. Appreciate people's time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. Everybody have a great day, and you'll hear from us shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.